Hello, everyone. I'm informed that this clock is slow, so we're going to get going right at 6, or as close to 6 as we can. My name is Chuck Willing. I'm a member of the Concord Energy and Environment Advisory Committee, which advises the City Council on energy and environment matters, as the name suggests. Just looking around the room, I can see that we're joined by one of our committee members, Mariah King, right there. And Beth Fenstermacher is the city staff person who works most closely with our committee, and she's in the back. I am here mainly to introduce Andrew, who will be the main speaker tonight. But before I did that, I wanted to just sort of give you some context for what we're going to be talking about. And I'm sorry, the one other thing I should say is our committee chair, Rob Warner, couldn't make it here tonight, and he would be giving this introduction if I wasn't giving it, but he sends his regrets. So we are here to discuss Concord Community Power. Andrew's the main presenter. I'll turn it over to him in a minute. But first, I just wanted to talk about a couple of decisions that the Concord City Council has made in recent years that kind of bring us to today. The first one of these happened in 2018. At that time, the City of Concord set a goal, or the City Council set a goal of 100% renewable energy for Concord. That goal is community-wide, meaning it's not just city government, but the whole community. And the components of it are 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and 100% clean transportation and clean thermal energy by 2050. So those are very ambitious goals, as you might suspect. And now we're sitting here in the year 2024. So we're approaching the date, at least for the first goal. I should say the goals are not legally binding, meaning there's no enforcement mechanism against the city if they don't achieve the goals. But we, as a committee, take the goals seriously, and we've been trying to think of what we can do to put Concord on a path to approach these goals, if not actually meet them, or meet them at the soonest possible time. The second city council decision took place in March, and that was a decision to pursue community power. That decision was made at our committee's recommendation, just as the earlier decision was. And at a city council meeting in March, the council approved pursuing community power, joining the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire that Andrew is here representing as a contractor, and also approved adopting Granite Plus as the default energy product. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as the presentation goes along. The reason that we recommended and the city council agreed to select Granite Plus as the default product was with that 100% renewable energy goal in mind. We wanted to take a tangible step toward achieving our goal while also delivering a savings on rates. After that decision was made, we took some other steps. We finalized our electric aggregation plan, submitted it to the Public Utilities Commission where it was approved. The City Council also approved it. And then we waited to see what the rates would be for this current period, because we weren't going to launch a program if the rates were such that we were not offering a savings to Concord electricity customers. We saw what the rates were, and they lined up. We're able to offer a savings at not only the lowest rate, but the Granite Plus rate, and even at the Clean 50 rate above that. So we made the decision to go ahead. After that, a few weeks later, you received in the mail notices like these, and I think I saw a couple of folks who brought theirs tonight. And then we've had public information sessions, of which this is the second. We did one 2 weeks ago up on the Heights as well. So we're trying to spread the word about all this. We are very pleased about the possibilities with this program. Very, very excited, and we think that Concord residents will also appreciate it as they experience it. It's the single biggest step we will have taken toward achieving our renewable energy goals while also offering savings. And kind of what we see as the opportunity in this program is, as you might expect, greener energy supply, lower rates, local decision-making about where we want our energy to come from, and then more customer choice. Andrew will explain all the choices that you have right now, but you will have more choices than you did before, both in the program and outside the program. So we think that whole package of benefits is something that we are really excited about and that Concord residents will be excited about. So I think with that, I want to turn it over to Andrew and let him explain the program, and then I think both of us will be available to answer any questions afterwards. Andrew?
Great, Chuck. Thank you very much. As Chuck says, my name is Andrew Hatch. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Community Power Coalition, and I'm very pleased to be with you tonight. My principal objective is to have everybody's questions answered before you leave tonight. We have a brief presentation just to sort of put the perspective around what we're talking about, what will be happening, and as importantly, what won't. As Chuck said, hopefully everybody that's an electric account holder will have received one of these. If I could just understand folks in the room, is there anybody who's an Eversource customer here? Or is everybody on Unitil? You just have a handful of Eversource customers in town, so it was probably expected that most folks would be Unitil. Everybody receives one of these letters that's focused on their current utility. So the one you'll have seen says at Unitil, and we'll come on to some of the details in a moment. The other question is anybody currently with a third-party supplier? A couple in the front here. So that's a situation that I do want to address so you'll understand fully your options. And then finally, does anybody have net metering? Does anybody have solar arrays? Some folks in the back, yeah. Okay, well, we will touch on those and we can get into some greater detail. But what I just want to do for everybody's benefit is just to recap where we are today, how we've got here, and what we're going to do going forward. This little slide deck will keep me on track. You'll have seen this little image in your letter. This is basically the concept that Concord Community Power has embarked upon. Concord Community Power is purchasing the power on behalf of the community through the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, and I'll explain more about the coalition and how it's been developing in a moment. The most important thing, as I said before, a lot about community power is that things don't change. And one of the things that won't change is that your electricity provider, Unitil, will continue to be responsible for providing the uptime, making sure that the electricity remains on. If there's any outages, you would communicate with Unitil for any repairs necessary, and they will continue to be responsible for the billing, and I'll show you how that's going to work as well. So everybody that's currently on what we call default supply of Unitil, so you're not with a third-party supplier, or you're not receiving net metering credits, will be automatically enrolled in Concord Community Power without any action required on your behalf, unless you choose to make some voluntary elections. The program is completely voluntary. We try to make it as easy as possible for folks to move in and out of a program and to serve their best interests with a minimum of fuss. But there's a lot more to community power than just saving money. And we may touch on some of those other ambitions of the City of Concord over the course of this evening. But the base offering is this, that folks are enrolled automatically into a default product called Concord Community Power. So where we are today is that we are in this transition period where up until the 25th of September, everybody has a choice to make as to whether they want to maintain the status quo and move into Concord Community Power, or maybe opt out. And beyond that date, you can continue to move in, out, up, down within the program at no cost. And the only delay in that election will be your meter read. Everybody has a different day of the month where Unitil reads the meter. So your meter read is in fact when Concord Community Power will kick in during the month of October. So I'm not sure what your meter read dates are. You'll know from your bill, and they are on a regular period during the month. So you won't see anything actually show up until your November bill. And probably with Unitil's billing, you will probably see a split bill during that month when you get your bill in November, which refers to the Unitil rates up until the point of when your meter was read, and then when it was switched to Concord Community Power, the prevailing rates for Concord Community Power for the second part of the month. We will not enroll folks automatically who are receiving a third-party supply or folks who are on net metering, but everybody else will be automatically enrolled. So there is no action required unless you want to do something other than receive the default, which, as Chuck said, will be Granite Plus in the city of Concord. And as I said again, once it's launched, you can still continue to opt into different categories and things. So it's very flexible and intended to make it as easy as possible. We have customer service folks who can help take you step by step through the process. And I'll come on to a slide in a moment that explains how you can reach out to them. The utility, the Unitil bill on the left-hand side is going to stay the same. The only thing that will be different will be under electric supplier service, you'll see Concord Community Power rather than your default electric supply from Unitil. All of the rates on the left-hand side, the electric service, that's all to do with delivery, and those rates are set by Unitil and in negotiation with the Public Utilities Commission. Concord Community Power has no involvement in those. It's purely your electric supply service. So your bill is split into the two, but it's all one bill, and you will receive just one bill from Unitil. And again, the only change will just be that line item. Is there any questions about that? I'm more than happy if people have brought a bill along, we can take a one-on-one look at your situation and answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
So once it starts, Unitil is then going to bill Concord Community Power for?
Well, they actually reimburse Concord Community Power. So it's like any other third-party arrangement. There is nothing for you to worry about. It's all done internally. Just to touch on what's happened and why we're here today, it's been many years since electricity has been deregulated in New Hampshire. And the folks that developed the regulations had it in their mind that by now, most of us would be doing something other than receiving default power from our utility. The idea was to introduce competition into the market and make sure prices were maintained at a low level. But particularly in the residential marketplace, that really hasn't taken off. There's a variety of reasons for that. One of them is it's a little complicated. The other is there is a lot of sort of attention that you need to pay to different rate structures, because those third-party suppliers in the state offer different lengths of periods of a contract. And so it's not apples and apples with the way that the utilities work. Now, Unitil, the only money they make, the only profit they're allowed to make by law is on the electric service side. They're required to provide you with default power, and they're provide you that power at no profit to themselves, so it's a pass-through. But they're restricted on the date that they can procure that power to just 2 dates in the calendar. So every 6 months, there's a new rate that's set. There's a rate that will be set in December, and there was a rate that was set at the beginning of July. So by the 1st of January, we'll know the rates that come into force by the beginning of February. And now we're in the rate period that started at the beginning of August and will run through to the end of January. So this is on the right-hand side, the image that you will see if you go to the Concord Community Power website. I don't know if people had the chance to do that. Concord Community Power's website is maintained by the Community Power Coalition, so it's communitypowernh.gov/Concord, and that will continue to be maintained and updated so that at any time when you need to know if rates are changing or what your other rates options, that's a great place to go. But you have the rates here in your letter, and these are currently in force right now. And as you can see, they run through the end of January. The coalition will be setting new rates at the very end of December that will come in force at the beginning of February. So you'll know, again, at least 30 days ahead what the new rates will be for the second part of the year. As you can see at the bottom, we have in the black colors down there, a Unitil and an Eversource rate. So Unitil's rate changed at the 1st of August to 10.506. And that's what you'll be seeing on your bills, and probably have already seen one in already with that rate. Above are the 4 levels of options that are offered to you by Concord Community Power. So you can see the bottom green one has that number in the circle of 24.3, and that's the same number as the one next to Unitil. And what that's all about is the minimum amount of renewable power that's required by state statute in the state of New Hampshire. Next year, that will tick up one more tick to 25.2. But unless the legislature does anything, it will then flatline at 25.2. The rates above that have higher renewable content. So, as Chuck said, the City of Concord has decided to set its default rate, providing the City of Concord with 33% renewable power at a small premium to the basic rate, just about 0.7%. So over here on the right-hand side, you can see the average cost of electricity for a customer using 650 kilowatt hours a month. That's just a sort of national average. You will all know from your electricity bill what your average or your rates of usage are. Everything that's multiplied on your bill is by the number of kilowatt hours that you use every month. It's a constant number. So we just use this to give an example of if you were using an average of 650, you would be paying Unitil $68 a month for your electric supply, not for the whole bill. And then if you move to Granite Plus, you will be saving $8 a month. The options to you, if you wish to, you could choose to opt down to Granite Basic and save that 0.7%. If you choose to do that, all you need to do is get in touch with the customer service folks. You can call the 800 number. You could go online to the portal that I mentioned. And on that portal, all you'll need to have is your account number. And you would input that and say you wish to take an action to opt down to Granite Basic. What we're rather hoping you might consider is opting up to Clean 50 or Clean 100. As you can see, there's a small premium to do so, but by doing that, you are making your statement of support of the goals of the City of Concord to reach 100% renewable power by 2030.
I might also point out that if you opted up to Clean 50, you would still be saving money versus the Unitil rate for 50% renewable energy. And that's been the case. It's not just for this rate period. There have been 3 prior rate periods, and that's been the case every single time so far. We can't guarantee that it will always be the case in every rate period, but the track record is starting to build of savings for the bottom 3 CPCNH products that you see.
Yes, sir.
I guess it's a concept that's way above me, but how do you know, like, the 50% seems like a great choice right off the bat, but how do you know they're actually doing that?
That's a great question, because how do we achieve a 50% renewable content? The reality is your electricity comes down the same poles and wires, irrespective of who your utility is, and the mix in New Hampshire. The whole concept of renewable content is met by the use of renewable energy certificates currently. So we buy power on the marketplace, and what we do is we purchase renewable energy certificates on your behalf if you've opted up to like 50%. And what they do is they are a vehicle to promote the development of renewable power. So the folks that are generating clean energy are generating renewable energy certificates that are for sale. And the people that want to buy it are the people that create the marketplace, and that creates the opportunity and encouragement for local developers to develop more renewable power. So it is a little bit of a construct rather than it changes the color of your electrons coming down the wire. You may have noticed the 4th page of your enrollment letter is called an environmental disclosure label. The exciting thing for geeks like me is that you are the first recipients of a real updated community power environmental disclosure label. And what I mean by that is that what we actually do when we're dealing with these renewable energy certificates is we buy them after a year. So we settled out the first year. The Community Power Coalition launched in April and May of last year. So we had a whole year of operation. And then we bought the renewable energy certificates to meet the requirements of our customers. And so what you're seeing here, and I would be the first to admit, it's not an easy read, but it just explains in actual terms what we've done to encourage the development of renewables in New England, because it shows you how much of the mix we've purchased in renewable energy certificates. Now, I assure you that if we jump down that rabbit hole, we won't be getting out of here until about 11 o'clock. I'm more than happy to talk with folks afterwards if you'd really like to get into this more. But this is just the general idea that we are developing at the moment. However, like I said before, there's a lot more to community power than just saving money. And what we're doing as the coalition is trying to generate and develop local generation assets that we may have more direct involvement with. And once that starts to happen, that's going to be an even greener way, if you will, of meeting these renewable goals. Did you want to speak to that at all more? Or is it, am I?
No, I think you're perfectly
I just want to throw you under that bus where we were at it.
No.
But all kidding apart, I hope that just sort of gave you a glimpse into how that's working. Yes, sir.
So, and totally want to respect the fact that you don't want to go down any rabbit holes, and I don't really want to do that either. But do you see at some point the mix here at all changing? Like, for example, Clean 100, 84% wind power. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason I'm asking the question, but do you see that changing, going more towards like solar in the future, for example?
It could. Yeah, I'm seeing a few rabbits popping up right now. But all kidding apart, okay, if we want, I think you're all a bunch of high achievers. So let's look at this. The residual mix on the right-hand side, that's actually what's in the open market to buy. When you come to satisfy your REC requirements in June, you don't have the luxury of just buying anything, because a lot of it's been bought already by others trying to satisfy their requirements. And so we are a little limited in terms of what's out there in the market to buy. So that's one of the factors that would influence what we would do. What I would want to say is that renewable energy certificates are available from a variety of sources. The coalition is committed, as I said earlier, to spur development of local generation. So our main focus is the most local renewable energy certificates available. So behind these numbers, I can tell you that virtually all of our Clean 50 and Clean 100 renewable energy certificates were purchased from either New Hampshire sources or our close neighbors in in Maine and Vermont. So the hydro, obviously, tends to be on a river or a lake. And so there's some of our Connecticut River neighbors that we've purchased power, but it'll all depend upon what's available. So what we're trying not to do is to purchase RECs that come from far afield, because you can satisfy our requirements that way, maybe slightly cheaper. We just don't believe that it's in the interest of New Hampshire to do that. Is that good enough for now? We can talk offline. I'm more than happy to do that. Just to keep on track, because I know people are busy, and I would like to get to the end, and then if we really want to get into some detail, I'm more than happy to stay as long as folks wish to. Just to make a point that there are options for commercial customers, and you'll have seen probably on the right here, it just gets into that down there. And in Unitil territory, there are some domestic customers who are also on a monthly variable rate. I wasn't quite sure why that happened, but I did have a conversation with somebody who made the light bulb go off. It might be in some people's interest if they're not year-round residents. It might be things like that that would make people go on, choose a variable rate. But in all the other utility areas, it's really just commercial customers. Does anybody have a business account here? If you were in a business and you used enough electricity, you would be on something that is more than just the basic general service, and you would be paying a different rate to that of the residential and small business customers. And that's what this is all about. I don't need to go into it a lot more unless people have specific questions, but what you may or may not be able to see on the slide, but you can certainly see in our documentation, is that when it all shakes out, we're still averaging out at 8.6 cents, and over the Unitil rate, saving 14%. So quite a considerable savings for commercial customers as well. And we've touched on the fact that Eversource is in a similar vein, but nobody is currently served here. So this really just summarizes what I wanted to sort of bring it all home with. Is we're talking about competitive rates. We're talking about clean energy options, your choices. And those are our two underpinning principles for all our members. Investing in the community. I get asked, what does that mean? It means a number of things. And I'll come on to it in a little bit more detail in a moment when I speak about what the coalition's all about. But we're a non-profit. So instead of us making profits, what we do with the surplus income from our programs, beyond the cost of procuring power and the cost of running the coalition, we call community benefits. And those community benefits are pulled together by all of the members of the coalition. And if you can think of a pie, that pie is getting bigger and bigger. But Concord has a slice. And Concord's slice is based upon the total load of electricity in Concord compared to the load of the whole coalition. And what that is doing is allowing if you will, a bank balance to grow and our balance sheet to improve. So we have the more credit worthiness. And credit worthiness gives you the chance to contract with bigger players. Once we get to a certain size, a critical mass, we will be able to cut out a lot of middle parties and procure power at even more advantageous rates that we will be passing on to our ratepayers. In addition, you may remember back in December, January and February 22 into 23, rates spiked. Rates spiked because of the cost of natural gas spiked. And that was because of international disturbances. And it was a bad day for Unitil and Eversource and Liberty. When they procured power, those rates had spiked. But those rates were passed on to you for 6 whole months. That's the kind of rate shock, as we call it, that we want to also insure ourselves against. So there's a possibility that some of those reserves might be used to tamp down any rate increases. Local control, as Chuck was saying, is all about not only having choices, but also having these this resource and this opportunity to decide over time how you may want to avail yourselves of the other growing services of the coalition, of which there may be many. So just briefly, this is my perennially out-of-date slide. Every time I turn around, it's changed, but in a good way. We have over 60 municipal members now and 2 counties. You are in Merrimack County, and in fact, Merrimack County is also in the process of launching community power at the same time as Concord. It doesn't affect Concord Community Power, and in fact, the Merrimack County rates are the same as Concord's rates, and in fact, all of the launched communities, as we call them, receive that same rate card, that rate card that we've just shown. The ones in blue have been operating for well over a year now. Sorry, green, colorblind. The ones in blue launched earlier this year. The ones in orange, yourselves included, are the ones just on deck to launch in October. So by the time we get to the end of October, we'll actually be serving 75 communities. Some of them are through the county model and some of them direct. We're currently serving 130,000 customers. That will tick up to somewhere in the 170,000s of customers. And going back to those green ones, the ones that were operating for a year come last April, that's where that $14 million in savings comes. Not from everybody, just that small group that launched for a whole year. So that gives you some idea. And when I say savings, I'm talking about, it's a calculation. If those folks had remained on default electricity supply in all of those towns, they would have paid $14 million more than they have done through community power. So that's a very compelling number. And alongside that, those community reserves I'm talking about, they got up to $10 million. So it makes the coalition already larger than all of the utilities other than Eversource. And we are continuing apace and will be launching new communities in 2025.
Can I just add a point while we've got the map
Yes.
up? First of all, what Andrew's highlighting, first of all, is tremendous growth with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. There were no operating programs before April of 2023. Everything you see on that map happened since then. And just in our area, so Concord's going to launch its program next month. At the time Concord launches its program, if you were to drive out of Concord in any direction, you would be driving into a community that already has a launch program or is launching at the same time as Concord. So that's kind of how quickly this is spread and how widely this is spread.
Yes, thank you for that, Chuck. And I would just mention, because I'm sure you have friends and neighbors in neighboring towns, one of the additional benefits of launching through a county model is that folks who are in towns who aren't yet involved in community power, they can still opt in to community power. They'd have to get in touch with the coalition and opt in, rather than the benefit for you is you don't have to take any action. But that's another really interesting development, because the folks here who have got third parties, anybody can buy into those, but you can't just elect to buy into community power unless you're within an operating group or community. A non-profit power agency. We're not just a non-profit, we are subject to right-to-know laws. We're called a government instrumentality. What that means is that we have to be completely transparent. So our budgets, our performances, our contract, everything that is to do with community power is in the public domain. We are answerable to our members. The whole coalition would not have got off the ground without a huge amount of volunteer effort, and it continues to depend upon that. Chuck is a very modest man, so I'll have to tell you, he is on the board of directors and became on the board when our first annual meeting elected a new tranche. We have 20 directors, 7 or so turnover every year or up for re-election every year. And then we have another 7 or 8 committees. And those committees are very important because it's to do with the strategy, with the risk management, with the decision making, with the governance. It wouldn't work without the volunteer effort. we were absolutely delighted when Concord decided to join us, because this added a lot of critical mass and a lot of expertise. And the folks that put the law together back in 2019 are very much all part of the coalition. This was the vision for this. So I'm very excited to be standing here, 3 or 4 years later with such good statistics to prove out what we envisaged. Are there any questions about the coalition? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that when you determine your rates, I assume you take the cost of the various vendors from whom you're getting electricity, and then you add something as a contribution to reserve. What is that? Is it a percentage? Is it pennies? What is added?
It's a great question. It isn't a hard number. It's what actually our risk management committee, our finance committee, our board of directors, and our executive committee all mutually decide is the right number. We want to build up that creditworthiness as fast as possible. To be candid, 120 days operating cash on hand is our goal. Once we get to that point, we can become, it's called a load-serving entity. It's at the highest level of operation. We can procure power without a middle party. That's what we're aiming for. We put a stake in the ground to say we could do that in 5 years. We can't become a load-serving entity until we've had 3 years of audited books. We've got 2 already. We would hope that we're on track to exceed that target. But we want to get to that point. We're not going to continue to build those reserves. We just want to maintain those so that we can maintain that. So it isn't an easy answer for you. What I can tell you is that the coalition doesn't grow exponentially as its membership grows. So in fact, the cost of getting the coalition off the ground and maintaining and growing our membership means that we are actually seeing a smaller slice of that stack, if you will, of the cost of the power, the rates, being the piece that is the cost of the coalition. So that would, again, positively impact our opportunity for reserves. But we know what the rates are, and we have to set our rates once we've got those rates. Our job is to try to make sure that we can pass through savings as best we can while we maintain a diligence about our growth and our future. So that sounds awfully fuzzy. I'm hating what I'm saying, but I can't be more specific than that for you. I would say that the only thing that finances the cost of the coalition is income from the rates we set. So it is truly a voluntary program. It is truly, there are no taxes, there are no impacts on people that opt out of the program. It is purely self-funded by the revenues. And I would just say as an aside, there is no exposure to the city of Concord from a liability standpoint to participate in this program. As you can see, community representation, Chuck Willing and Beth Venstermacher are both in the room tonight, your representatives. They are the people that we work with, along with many others in the Concord community. And Concord has a vote and has an influence in the future of the coalition, as does every other member of the coalition. So, oh, yes, please.
I understand where you're going with the reserves to build it up. Are the reserves only available to the coalition?
The group membership.
And not for social programs?
Right, no. No, well, that's why I said, the anticipation is that we're going to cap out at a point when it's just reached our internal goals of creditworthiness. It's not a pool of money that's going to continue to grow. I mean, there are some concepts around excess reserves. There is another concept that is not part of the Concord Community Power offering right now, where you can build local reserves, and that there is a provision for that, but that is a separate program and one that a community by community conversation will take place. The community reserves, the group reserves I'm talking about, are just the creditworthiness of the coalition. So we don't anticipate them generating funds that would be used. What they can be used for is, again, we would be a creditworthy counterparty to a development. So say in the future, even locally or elsewhere in the state, there was a renewable energy development that wants to have somebody buy their power over time. It's called an offtake agreement. We would be creditworthy enough to say, we'll take that power for 20 years. And if you bid it out for 20 years, you might get it at a very, very good rate. So that's the sort of financing concept that we've got there. But again, we can talk offline if we want to go deep on that one. But
But the reserves cannot be touched for other purposes.
right, yes, and they are all, it's all very carefully minuted and monitored through all of our boards and committees. This is the sort of granular stuff that I, again, can talk one-on-one with you, but I've already touched on this. The folks who are ineligible for automatic enrollment, a bit of a mouthful, basically the folks on a third-party supply are very welcome to opt in to Community Power, but we don't know what their current prevailing rates are, what their contract is, whether there's any early termination fee, anything like that. So we're telling folks that are on a third-party supply to check it out, see if it's of interest to them, and if they wish to enroll, just get in touch with our customer service. What you don't have to do is shut down your contract, go back to the default power, and then enroll. You just need to get in touch with our customer service, and they would take care of making the switch for you. And I want to touch on net metering very briefly. I have a second slide for that. The largest general service customers of Unitil, again, will not be automatically enrolled, but unless there's a representative from Concord Hospital who wants to discuss that, that's a really big user of electricity. Again, we can serve them. Typically, they're already on a third-party supply, and we don't make an automatic enrollment. There's an email address down here that isn't as well advertised as a third option as I would prefer. Please feel free to info@communitypowernh.gov. It goes to our customer service center. If it's a tricky question, it gets escalated to somebody like me. If it's a straightforward question, they will be able to help you. Or you can say, I want to do something, please help me. And just email them. You don't have to go on the phone, you don't have to go online. So we try and make it as easy as possible for everybody. And this, we're coming to the final slide here. I'm not going to go on ad nauseam about net metering, particularly as we only have one couple in the back of the room who are receiving net metering. I wish I could stand here today and say we can enroll and reimburse net metering customers today, but we can't. We're trying to change that. I don't know if everybody in here understands the concept of net metering, but most net metering for residential customers is because you have solar power on your roof, you have a meter that goes both ways. When the sun's shining, you're probably producing more than you're using, and when it's wintertime, you're using more than you're producing, and it nets out. Because of the way the utilities have set up the net metering program, we can't get hold of the data to reimburse you for any credit. There are two flavors of net metering: people who had a solar or other form of local generation before 2017, and everybody since 2017. And the rules changed in 2017. If you're a net metering 1.0 customer, you just receive credits for kilowatt hours. If you're a net metering 2.0, there's a monetary credit. And that one is particularly difficult because we can't get the data. If you're a net metering 1.0 customer, I would like to talk to you because there could be some benefits of joining the coalition. That's probably all I need to say unless anybody would like to ask any more questions on that. Yes?
I'm just confused just as you said, the amount that we pay Unitil every month varies throughout the year depending on whether, what we use and whatnot. Why is the amount that we pay Unitil now not accessible, and why can't that portion be done through Community Power?
We may be able to resolve things with Unitil a little quicker than some of the other utilities. Unitil installed smart meters a number of years ago. I used to have a business in Concord, and I remember when it arrived. The only downside is that they didn't actually install the software to use the technology that you have available to you other than to read your meter without driving past. So they have a little bit more of an advanced sort of infrastructure, and it's more getting their back-end information available to us. What we get right now, simply put, is if you make more than you use, we get a big flat zero. We don't know what that number is. But we are working to resolve it in two different ways. One is because we have a group, the Regulatory and Legislative Affairs Committee, and we have a director who is intervening on behalf of the coalition, both at the legislature and also at the Public Utilities Commission. And we've made quite a bit of headway in terms of the Public Utilities Commission have agreed with our position that the law doesn't need to change, the utilities just need to get into compliance. As you can imagine, that is still a conversation that is going to have to keep going on. As I said, we're hopeful that we'll be able to help folks in Unitil territory sooner than perhaps Eversource. But while we're on it, there's just one more problem with it, and that's at the bigger New England picture. Now, I get asked this a lot of times. Eversource, Unitil, Liberty, the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, they are your distribution utility. And why that's important is that their responsibility is to distribute electricity. But they don't transmit electricity. The transmission are the big poles and wires, and they come in to the state, and then it goes out to the distribution network. The organization that's responsible for that is called ISO New England, the Independent Systems Operator. Their job is to make sure that we have enough electricity now and in the future to meet any of our anticipated needs, so that on the hottest day of the year or the coldest day of the year, and we're all cranking the machines that run the electricity, we don't get a blackout. That's the best way I can put it. At that level, the way that net metering was set up was that it's not accounted for like it is actually working in the field. You know, when you are producing electricity on your home more than you're using, it is flowing up the wires and around to your friends and neighbors. And they and you should get credit for that. But it's not the way it's metered by the utilities. And so that's the problem with the net metering piece. And then at the bigger end of the picture with New England, we can't even take credit for that if we did credit you, because it's not accessible. So we have to give you credit for a kilowatt hour and go buy a kilowatt hour. It doesn't make a lick of sense. It's just the way it is right now. So we need to resolve this. It's going to take time, but we're working very hard. Our Regulatory and Legislative Affairs group is doing what we envisage, which is representing the interests of ratepayers to promote. You know, time of use rates is something that we'll all read about and hear about, but most of us can't even use our electricity more smartly because we're not being offered those services by the utility. We want to change that, and that's what we're in the business to do. That's some of our longer term goals. Was that helpful? Yes, ma'am.
This is not a question, it's a comment. I want to give kudos to Rob Warner, former city councilor, who several years ago started this whole process. And I don't know how long, Chuck, but you have been on that committee since the inception.
Yes.
Do you have an idea of when that started?
The idea of community power, or the idea of,
No, the committee that Rob.
oh yeah, either 08 or 09, I think, yeah.
So he's been diligent about following this process.
Yes.
And you were a former member of the committee for a little while too.
Okay, so I have a question. This may not make any sense, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Coalition is buying energy twice a year, and Unitil and Eversource and everybody else is buying it twice a year. You can offer it cheaper than they can, but they're bigger than the coalition. Is there no incentive for utility companies to lower their rates to try and be more competitive with the coalition? And is the big difference that they're for profit and you're not for profit, or what's going on?
That's a great question. There was one basic statement in there that is not correct, and I may have misled you in the way I've explained things. The utilities, as I said, are regulated and they can only procure power twice a year on a date certain. And they're not allowed to profit from it. So they're not exactly falling over themselves to pass on savings, and they're not incentivized to and I'm not suggesting that on that day that they're not buying in your best interest, they're bidding it out and getting the best rate, and here it is. The coalition matches that schedule of every 6 months in terms of setting its rates, but we procure power all the time. And so in the real world, we're procuring most of our power in and around those rate setting periods. But we can buy as short as less than a day, and we could buy over a number of years. And what our risk management group, and in fact, I should give credit to some of our third-party vendors. We use a company called Ascend Analytics that are international, and they advise us on the strategy to get the best balance between risk and savings. So we have this sort of basket of contracts that are always being renewed. We have the added challenge that we're growing like crazy. So we've got to meet those growing needs. But ultimately, that's our competitive advantage. And we are only in the business of procuring electricity, not maintaining poles and wires. Honestly, we do have, letters in terms of conversations and comments from the Public Utilities Commission, from the utilities that have made it very clear. They are not regarding us as a competitor or a problematic. We're actually what was envisaged in the original deregulation. So I believe they're probably having to put some of their resources to offer that default power. And if they didn't have to do it, they'd actually save money because they can't make profit on it. You see what I'm saying? So there isn't that issue, and that's how we can make sure our rates are competitive, if that's not a...
Do you in fact buy power more frequently than twice a year?
Oh yes, all the time,
Oh, you do.
all the time. Yeah, we just set, well, I don't like that term, but yeah, we're trying to act as responsibly to leverage the markets and buy in a very competitive world. Since I've been standing here, the price of electricity has probably changed dozens of times. When the hot day turns into a hot night and everybody goes home and cranks the AC, the cost of electricity goes up tenfold. It's just amortized over this 6-month period. So we're in those markets. Back there, sir.
Okay, 2 questions. If you go to the one table, Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire versus the New England Power Pool, so why did you exclude nuclear power?
Well, because the regulations around nuclear is carbon-free, but it is not renewable. That's one way of looking at it. So, in fact, the nuclear industry does not trade in renewable energy certificates.
Does coal, imported power, natural gas, I mean, it's part of your Granite Basic mix, it would fall in there, but I mean, does oil have RECs?
No. No, and this is the way that I said this can get very difficult to read, because we are, the piece that is in that base offering, that 24.3%, is much more set by the requirements of the state. We've got a lot more latitude to add our additional renewables above and beyond that. So everything, the non-renewables below the line, just shows you the basic mix of the power in New England. And
So if we go to Granite Basic, the column, total renewable is 16.8%. That's not your total supply. You're including coal, imported power, natural gas, oil, to meet the 100%, right?
right. So we're not buying RECs for that at all, because that's the bit that is...
But you are buying electricity from an oil source, natural gas, imported power, and coal in the Granite Basic package.
Yes.
Okay. Right, so, okay, so that's part one. So part two, going to the bottom of the page, if you're looking at the environmental characteristics, in order to match the CO2, NOx, and SO2 relative to the New England Power Pool, you have to go to at least a clean 50 option, which gets you 10 cents versus 10.5 cents for Unitil. I don't have their disclosure statement in front of me. So if you're talking about trying to promote reductions in CO2, NOx, and SO2, you've got to start at the clean 50 and then move beyond to the clean 100 if you're not including nuclear power.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
Okay, well, and we can talk about that a lot more. I mean, there's some stuff in there. Again, it's a dangerous rabbit hole because a lot of it's set by statute, and then because of availability of certain categories, the state and the Public Utilities Commission decide to reset their set objectives. So that 16.8, you know, I often get, well, why is that not 24.3? And there's a reason for it, and it's because it was allowed for by the PUC on a retroactive basis. You've pointed out the best point. If you take away anything from this, that blue line that says total renewables, when we say it's 33%, 50%, and 100, that's how we're backing that up. And that's the best answer I can honestly give you. So just to sort of summarize, I certainly can come back to you 1 second, sir. Just that, as I've said earlier, everybody will be automatically enrolled on their meter read during October. It's a completely voluntary program. Folks do have to take action if they're on default power right now to opt out. You will continue to receive your electricity from Unitil, and those with third party would have to opt in. It's a self-funded program with no tax impact on the city of Concord. Yes, sir.
You were mentioning the price shock that happened when the price of natural gas took off. So what this is showing me, what this chart is showing me, is that if you were in the clean 100, you would not have seen while your rate would have been higher all the way up, you would not have seen that shock at all. Your rate would have stayed the same right straight through it, and you would have noticed no difference.
Well, bear in mind that these rates will change on a 6-monthly basis. What we would have been challenged when we launched, we were in that rate period, but not at the beginning of it, and we launched at 15.8 cents versus 22 cents from Unitil. So the delta was quite significant in dollars and cents. Percentage-wise, it was still sort of in keeping with where we're trying to be today, but it was a big delta. So that is an example of how, you know, the rates can be tamped down, for want of a better description, when there's this spike in you know, because honestly, after those rates that were set in that December that started for you in February and went on, the cost of natural gas also went down because it was all about a war in Ukraine and the cost of natural gas spiking. But once it all shook out, the energy markets, you know, went back to more normal numbers quite quickly, but the rates had already been set for 6 months by the utilities. So we would know a little bit more about that, and that's how we would engineer maybe less of that spike. That's all I'm saying about that. I wouldn't want to go too far into saying, you know, we can just maintain a flat line irrespective of what happens in the world. That is not reality, but we're definitely thinking about any impact that our ratepayers will have, and we want to have one of those tools in our toolbox if we need it, if that's not a vague enough answer.
I'm still just trying to get my head around how that I could be on the clean 50 plan, paying this rate, and my next door neighbor is on the Granite Plus plan or even the Granite Basic plan, we have the same exact electrons. Where does the difference in what I'm paying go?
That goes back to what I was talking about earlier, the renewable energy certificates. It's the way that we procure power, and we help to initiate the development of renewable energies by this tradable commodity called a renewable energy certificate. So it costs the coalition money to satisfy your requirement or your election to take more and more renewable electricity. You are physically not receiving anything different than your friends and neighbors in terms of the quality of your electricity. It is what it is. So it's a little bit of an artificial concept.
The difference in what I'm paying.
Right.
You're setting aside to go back to, so that next month and next year, you can now go to a renewable energy producer and say, I can bring you this many customers and I'm ready to bring, I've already got this revenue stream started.
That's conflating two ideas. What I thought you were going down the road is saying every year we know what you've said you wanted more than the basic mix. And we then go buy the renewable energy certificates to satisfy your request. And that money goes into the renewable energy generators that are already producing power. What you're talking about is the separate concept of us being able to initiate or take power from a renewable energy producer. And that is something that we would do to improve our mix of renewables down the road, rather than just buying the basic mix in the New England. Right.
You'll become an initiator instead of
Right.
just a consumer.
And you'll hear, I mean, community power is, you know, we want to keep it simple for everybody, and we want to keep it easy for everybody to understand. We cannot make a cast iron guarantee that every 6 months we will always provide the lowest cost of electricity, but it's our only objective, and we're doing everything we can in the way that we've built the coalition to achieve that goal. That's what's important to bear in mind. You won't get a letter every 6 months, so it is important to remain diligent. Coming around in January, we will be telling everybody in every way that we can, and I know the City of Concord has got a lot of communication channels to get this information out. We have the handouts, and we have information that we will route through your committees, and folks will know what your new rates are, because you may decide to opt up or down, whatever is the right thing for you. You will also know what the prevailing rate for Unitil will be, so you can make a comparative smart decision. But they will change. What might happen is that you may be offered to voluntarily opt into other rate options in the future. We don't know, and some of those may be those special renewable contracts that we've dealt with one-on-one. But we want to keep it simple for everybody, and apples, and that's why we're doing it this way. Yes, sir.
The current coalition consists of 2 counties and 57 municipalities. What happens to the other 9 counties and the roughly 160 other municipalities?
Well, what happens to them at the moment is that they are watching with some interest as the coalition evolves. There are, to be completely transparent, another 8 or 9 communities that have launched community power through another model, which is through a broker, as they call it. They're doing something slightly different, and I would be happy to talk to you about that offline. But so there's another 9 that are in that bucket, and another 20 or so of communities that may go down that road at some point. We, as the coalition, our membership has another dozen or more communities that haven't launched yet. So there's quite a number of those communities that aren't currently served by the coalition that we're already in contact with, and they'll come online in the future. Ultimately, we're only staying in New Hampshire, so we could and hopefully will serve a vast majority of the population in the future. But we've only been going for just under 18 months right now, and we've already achieved about a third, and we're talking to most, or we know who the rest of them are, and we're very much encouraging them to consider coming on board. gentleman behind you, and then
So if everybody jumps to one of these, how do the existing companies afford to maintain the infrastructure?
well, again, they can't profit from it in the first place. They maintain the infrastructure out of the revenues they receive from the other side of your bill, from the delivery side.
So
And they were anticipating this when it was deregulated.
Yeah.
And so,
In the way that the utilities look at the coalition, it's just like any other third-party supplier. And they're out there and have been for many years. And so it isn't they're not losing any money by what's happening. I understand that. I mean, it's the first reaction of, people we're taking jobs away from the utility, or we're destabilizing the utilities. That won't and can't happen. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the nuclear question. Does a kilowatt hour produced by a nuclear plant cost more than from other sources? Because I don't understand why you wouldn't tap into that to make the environmental impact better.
Well, the reality is you can't really do much. Nuclear power is what's called a base load. The generation of nuclear power. If you start to look at the mix of power in our grid, that's both locally generated and imported. In New Hampshire, in terms of generation inside the state's boundaries, nuclear power is over 50%, and that's Seabrook. But Seabrook is Seabrook, and it produces this power on a consistent basis. It's not something you can fire up and drop it off. And irrespective of your view on nuclear power, it is something that we all depend on as this base load. But it's not bought and sold on a contracts basis in the way that you're sort of envisaging. It's part of the mix. So I'm not sure I'm getting to the nub of your question, but we don't make those elections when we buy power. That's what I go back to. We make elections to buy power, and it's the power that comes into New Hampshire, and we try and get it at the most affordable rate, and then we green it up with the renewable energy certificates. That's the best way I can explain it to you.
Partly that most of the power generated by Seabrook doesn't stay in New Hampshire.
Well, I was careful what I said. I said our generation. I didn't say our consumption. I would not be the right person to answer that accurately. It could or it might not be. I mean, there's so much of this is so complicated. I mean, most of us, as long as the bill's not outrageous and the light goes on, we're all good. But for how that gets done is a minute by minute miracle, to be quite frank. And the more I get involved in it, the more I'm amazed at how we keep all this going. And it's very, very complicated. ISO New England do a great job of maintaining and making sure that we don't have blackouts and brownouts and things like that. There are other parts of the country that are not as well served. And so we're very lucky to be in ISO New England, to be quite honest. Gentleman at the back?
So could you differentiate between community power and, let's say, a co-op?
Mm-hmm.
What are the major differences?
Right. Well, obviously we have the New Hampshire Electric Co-op. So they are a non-profit. The co-op movement was created to allow the democratization of electricity and to allow access to electricity for underserved areas. What we've got as a sort of example today is broadband. And the developers of broadband have gone out and built out the marketplace where it's profitable, but then all the people outside of that it's too hard, too expensive, not economic to serve, just don't get it. Well, the co-op was created, and co-ops all around the country were created to make sure the rural communities were also served and were built out. So they're all about poles and wires too. And we're not in the poles and wires business.
Administratively, you have a board of directors.
Yes.
How are they elected?
They're elected by the members at an annual meeting each year. The directors have 3-year terms, It's staggered, so a third of the board comes up for election every year.
So who represents the members?
The members are represented by member representatives, so I am Concord's member representative. I put myself forward to be a candidate for the board of directors and got elected to the board of directors, but any representative of any member could do the same.
And who elected you?
The city manager appointed me following the decision of the city council to join the Community Power Coalition.
Is that the citizens of the community
Yeah.
then vote on the council members?
Yes.
And the council members, and that's how this will work?
Yes.
Yes,
Is there a long-term goal of increasing the availability of renewable energy through this process? Like right now, we all opted in the state of New Hampshire for 100%. Does that energy exist and would they be able to meet that need? But does this in some way incentivize or help companies decide, yes, we are gonna expand in New Hampshire, there's a real need there?
Yeah, very much so. Can I
Yeah,
take that?
that's a good one.
Sort of been devoting thought to this. First of all, just the purchase of additional RECs does do that. It create, it's signaling to the market, we want to buy a product from renewable energy generators, which then causes renewable energy generators to want to build more projects. But what we'd also like to do, probably as an even bigger signal than that, is contract directly with renewable energy generators to buy both their power and their RECs, and do it, as Andrew was referring to earlier, on a long-term contract basis, hopefully lowering the cost of it as low as it can go, but giving them a guaranteed revenue stream that they can financially justify to, and most of these are for-profit companies that are doing it. They can justify it to their investors and their lenders and so on and so forth. There are some barriers in state law that make that hard right now for a community power program or for CPCNH to do exactly that. But that's sort of another regulatory push that's going on right now to kind of open up those possibilities. And we believe that when we are able to do that, we can send a very big signal to the market. Please develop renewable energy projects. And if you do, talk to us and we might buy your power.
And then, so long-term, the cost of renewable energy might be a little bit more affordable.
Yeah.
for folks, right?
Yeah. In my personal opinion, that's the best way to get it as low as it can go, as opposed to buying power on the market and putting RECs on top of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any plan to have a lower electric rate if you do your laundry after midnight or something? I had that like 50 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know. You might detect I'm from a little further east than Concord. And, I remember in the 70s, we had things called night storage heaters, which are just basically a bunch of bricks in the bottom of a big thing on the wall. But, it heated up when power was cheap and let it out when it was more expensive. And we were incentivized to use those. So it's not new as a concept. Time of use rates and the use of the technology that's now available to us is very much available in the marketplace in the whole of the US. There's a lot of places where that's much more available than it is in New Hampshire. The for-profit utilities have a number one goal of ensuring that their shareholders get their guaranteed return on investment. So you have to think that everything is to that end. So their investment in technology and other things may be at a cost to their shareholders. And so it's a decision that a for-profit company may not take as willingly as we would hope. And so what we're trying to do is inspire and to have some voice for our ratepayers to push for this. We have within our concepts and our arrangements ways that we might inspire and do that ourselves. We could, under our own regulations, install our own meters, for example, and but don't think we're going to spend, because we don't have tens and tens of millions to do that. But there's a lot of there's the lobbying to try and get it done because the technology exists. There's the demand, supply and demand conversation about, and then facilitating this marketplace. So it's complicated, but we're definitely thinking about how to help people help themselves. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
I have children who live in California, and between the hours of 4 and 9, you run your electric dishwasher, your washing machine, your dryer, you pay a higher rate.
Same
And that's how they, for the stockholders, make their money.
Yeah, I mean, it's the supply and demand, and the technology exists. So what we knew as making those decisions manually can now be done with technology, and that's one of the things that we can go in all different directions about what this might allow us to do. But it goes back to that slide to say local power decision making is now in our hands and not just in the hands of the large corporations. So we can hopefully push for a lot of this that helps local people and local folks save money as our primary objective, and not just a sort of add on to the other objectives of the for-profit organizations. That's our hope, and we've got so much volunteer energy and effort. We're about to have our October meetings where we're going to get much more into the weeds of what's next about the coalition. If I was going to use a metaphor, we're not out of diapers, we're kind of staggering along, but we haven't even really started to walk, let alone run right now. But this has been built for the long term. The lady who mentioned California has the longest operating, it's called community aggregation and various other words. They've been at it for over 20 years. Marin County is the original one, and I believe they have $1.2 billion in assets on, and some of the stuff they're doing, not only in local energy, renewable energy development, but they've got some programs where they're helping low-income folks to insulate their homes and improve the energy efficiency of their homes at no cost. They will walk up and say, "Hi, we're from the electric aggregation, and we'd like to insulate your home at no cost. Have a nice day." That's the stuff that makes the hair on my neck stand up. And that's what we want to do with this. Well, I can't thank you so much. One more question, sir.
Just a comment. You've said several times tonight that this program is voluntary,
Yes.
and yet we're automatically enrolled in it.
Yes.
That doesn't seem to fit with the concept of being voluntary to me.
Well, it's voluntary in much as if you wish to step out. Yes. Unfortunately, you do. Yes.
Okay. It seems that it should be the other way around.
Well, if it was the other way around, I wouldn't be standing here. If it worked the other way around, I wouldn't be standing here, because we've had deregulation for 20 years. And although there are cheaper options out there, the vast majority of people have not acted. And we can only offer these rates with the critical mass of participating members. So although we do ask people to take an action, and I understand your point, what we're trying to do is to make that as easy as possible. And I come to these presentations a lot. Some folks, just come to me and said, "I'm not even prepared to do that." And I said, "Well, between you and me, give me your name and address. I will go to the back end and I'll opt you out." I don't want anybody to be doing this unless they're all in. That's
Can
the
I
best.
add to that too? Andrew said earlier, the community power has existed as a possibility in New Hampshire for 25 years-ish. At first, it was only allowed on an opt-in basis. You could start a program on an opt-in basis, and if it chose to do so. No communities chose to do so. And the reason is it becomes very, very hard to assemble the demand that makes possible the prices that you saw when you don't know who's going to opt into the program. So basically, I guess liken it to bulk purchasing. You can get a better per unit rate if you are able to assemble, a large demand for the product. So that's kind of the theory, I think, that undergirds an opt-out program. Every single community power program that's operating in the state right now is an opt-out program. They changed the law in 2019 to allow an opt-out program, and that's when communities said, let's explore this and let's implement it. So that's the logic of it. Now, if you still believe, it should still be every individual person's choice, I respect that. But I think that's the basic answer.
I don't know if either of you can answer this question, but with the deregulation of electricity in the state, they established stranded costs. How long are we going to be paying for stranded costs?
I mustn't be flippant. I want to just say,
Forever?
yeah, you and me won't see the end of it.
Okay.
I don't, to be quite honest, sometimes actually your stranded cost recovery charge is a negative number. It is there's a lot to it, and it's a very difficult concept to get into. Our consumer advocate, Don Crease, is representing us as ratepayers and continues to monitor those innocuous line items that are called things that were intended not for us to understand. But he does do a lot of work to intervene and make sure that some of these burdens to the ratepayers are fully exposed, and that's what the Public Utilities Commission is charged with doing, is making sure that the interests of ratepayers are balanced with the interests of maintaining the utilities' viability. It's all very well and good to knock the utilities, but if they went away, we'd have an even bigger problem. Thank you all for your time tonight. It's been very nice to speak to you.